Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeves. Support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey, guys. Welcome back.
Ruben Wrestler.
Hey, happy Father's Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy Father's Day to all the MTG dads out there. I am the MTG dad for the podcast, for a lot of the community in some ways. People have pointed that out a little bit. My oldest daughter just turned 20, and that doesn't make me feel old or nothing. And as we get closer here, the next year or two, I will have been a dad longer than half of my life. Yep. So, you know,
I definitely feel like you're my father figure within Magic content creation. So that also helps. I've been told that I have dad energy, particularly amongst my friends. And I definitely take on the role of like dad at music festivals, trying to make sure everybody's hydrated when there are drugs and whatnot. But I'm not, I think it's good that I'm not an actual father for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the dad jokes come to you. They give you a little pamphlet. It comes every month. But mainly, you know, I don't have any huge truths. I feel like there was one piece of advice that I listened to that really helped me kind of sort of get the girls, my oldest girls, kind of up and running, which is their studies found that there was one thing that is common amongst all valedictorians. Rich or poor does not matter. The one thing that was common amongst all of the best students around the country is that they all had dinner with their family every night. And so I made sure to have my girls, you know, around the table without a phone, you know what I mean, talking about their day and how stuff went every day. And, you know, nothing's perfect and it's not going to fix everything or whatever, but it was nice to have a meal every day with them, and hopefully that helped. So
that's a nice piece of advice.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah.
There you go. That said, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Commander Legends 2 cards. Ruben?
Yeah, and this week's winner, I really thought was well thought out and gives some good advice here. And it's a repeat winner from our past.
Ooh.
Hey Apples, right? Get your copies of Deep Gnome Terramancer while you can. 2 mana value is a pretty important breakpoint for ramp spells in Commander, and this little guy is offering the potential for multiple triggers of ramp over the course of the game. Might end up as the white Dockside Extortionist before it's all said and done.
Ooh. Deep Gnome Terramancer is already $15+. It is a white and generic mana for a 2/2 rare gnome wizard with flash, and it has Mold Earth. That's just a flavor word. Mold Earth says whenever one or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you may search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle. Do this only once each turn. So any ramping, you get benefit, and you flash it in whenever they ramp, so you're always going to get that one trigger. Seems awesome.
Yeah, and it does not go get a basic Plains. It goes and gets a Plains card, which is always nice.
That is a big bonus. And ramp is super important in EDH because I have a tendency to play decks that don't have a lot of it, and I always get my butt whooped. So definitely like to see a card like this.
Wizards has definitely gotten better at making 2 mana white creatures that are just like nice scalpels. You know, they do a thing, they do it well, they punish well. Let's go.
Good against like Solemn Simulacrum, which is one of the most common cards in the entire format. I mean, even something like Wayfarer's Bauble, any rampant growth effect, any explosive vegetations effect. Thank goodness Golos is no longer in Commander, but I mean, this thing has a lot of potential, especially in the Commander format.
Let's go. Well, congratulations to Hey Apples. Please contact us on social media for your prize, ideally Twitter DMs at MagicMicsCast. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate, because it is time to talk about the dads, big dad energy, all in Magic. And I think it's going to get a little weird, you know? I don't know. It's going to get a little weird.
Yeah.
This list was a lot harder than the Mother's Day one.
Yeah, there's certainly less good dads in Magic the Gathering than there are good mothers. There's not a ton of great. I think it's a facet of Magic being a fantasy game, and telling a fantasy story, and a big portion of a lot of the fantasy genre is not great father figures. And so while there are some dads out there, I don't really want to talk about how they're not the best dads in the world. So finding good dads was fewer and further between, it seemed.
We also lose out on the mother animals. So like,
true.
We lost out on almost all animals, like,
right.
Because most of them are associated with the den mother and the thing that's sitting on the egg or whatever the case may be, where we don't really have male like animals that do a similar thing. Like, I don't know, is there a seahorse we could have used? Probably.
Right.
But like, I don't think it would have had a picture of a baby seahorse. So there was just a lot less options as well.
Yeah. And there are quite a few hires on many lists, but we will get started here with number 10 from Ruben. What you got?
So one of the, I'll call it one of the definitions of fatherhood is being the progenitor of a vampire bloodline. And while many of the leaders of various bloodlines don't have direct descendants, one of them that canonically does indeed have a magic card, and it's a magic card that I'm not sure I've ever seen cast or discussed before. And that is going to be Strephon, the Morer Progenitor. Strephon is a 3/2 flying vampire noble for 2 generic mana, a red and a black, from the Crimson Vow Commander decks. And has the ability at the beginning of your end step, create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. And whenever Strephon attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. And if you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until the end of the turn. Strephon is the progenitor of the Morer bloodline, one of the minor bloodlines of Innistrad. The most iconic card probably is the Twins of Morer Estate, which were 2 relatives, not canonically children of Strephon directly, but 2 relatives who kept an eye over the devouring house.
I always find the vampire bloodline families to be very interesting, not just in Magic, but just in general, how they're like, that is the father of the bloodline, which kind of links them, because they do act a lot like family, even though, and treat the starter of the clan as their father figure, but they're really not related in any way. But that's definitely how they behave. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's always neat because, they freeze them in time, right? Like, so you'll freeze somebody at 40 years old. You'll freeze the little girl at, 8 years old or whatever, like an Interview with a Vampire, all sorts of neat stuff. Crimson Vow, man, that set you don't talk about a swing and a miss, man. Like the whole Crimson Vow is just not great. It just didn't go over great. Didn't sell a lot. Nerd Girl, what's number 10?
My number 10 is one of the only, so it's one of the first things that came to my head, but isn't actually a father. So this is one I'm going to need a pass on. But this particular character was in a deck, and that deck was a standard deck, and it had the name Ghost Daddy. Perfect. So I thought only appropriate that we add Ghost Council of Orzhov to the list.
Nice.
This is a 4 mana, 2 white, 2 black for a legendary creature spirit. It says whenever Ghost Council of Orzhov enters the battlefield, target opponent loses a life, you gain a life. For 1, you can sacrifice a creature, exile Ghost Council, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. It's a 4/4 as well. So this was just like a really big thing in standard at the time. And the deck was called, like I said, Ghost Daddy. So this was the father of the deck. Can I get a pass?
It's perfect.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This card was great. This card was weird. Like, it didn't immediately catch on. And I think at some point there was the realization that it's really difficult to wrath this creature away. And Supreme Verdict or no, it wasn't Supreme Verdict way back in the day, but, depends on which one. We're talking about Ghost Council is over, not, are we talking about Amstadat? We're talking about Ghost Council, or are they kind of the same thing?
Ghost Council of Orzhova
is the card that was chosen, right?
Yes.
Orzhova, yes.
Yes. The original old school.
The original one that was in the Ghost Dad deck,
Yes.
as opposed to the Obzadat Ghost Council, which was sort of the rebirth version.
Right. Version 2.0. But yeah, this card was sweet, and it was just one of the first times. And again, you go all the way back to Guild Pact. There was no aristocrats that didn't really exist yet, or for black white to be like sacrificing for cool value and stuff like that. I mean, we're going all the way back to what's that Savior's card that makes like 3/1/1s? Promise of Boonray or something. Yeah. So all that stuff kind of worked together. It was sweet.
Yeah. The Ghost Dad deck was a black-white control sort of mid-range deck that used the card Tallow Wisp to gain card advantage.
Well, there you go. From way back in the day.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, so I'll take my pass on the first couple choices for myself here for my number 10. I mean, you could argue that there are spawn, and making spawn makes ones very fatherly or whatever. But, Emrakul certainly was defined as female. And so I'm over here with my boy Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre. He's big, he's scary. He makes little squiggly things. Okay, big guy energy. For 11 generic mana, it is a mythic legendary Eldrazi. It's a 10/10, and when you cast the spell, you destroy target permanent. Originally showed up in Rise of the Eldrazi. It is indestructible. It has Annihilator 4, which means whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 4 permanents. Damn, that could be the most crushing mechanic of all time. Literally the most demoralizing. When Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library.
Yeah. He is referred to as he in the lore, for whatever reason. But yeah, he is ironically the smallest of the 3 Titans. And
God, it's $60. This card is
really
$60.
Yeah. And the only one where I think the second was better than the first, the second printing.
Yeah.
Because Ceaseless Hunger certainly sees a lot more play than Infinite Gyre does.
Yeah, it's true. I think we also put one of these squiggly spaghetti monsters as Mother as well for Mother's Day. So This is fitting. I like having one of these on the list, certainly.
There you go. All right, let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what you got?
So my number 9 is one of those bad dads. I don't think that this dad is a particularly nice person. However, it is central to the story of Strixhaven that we get a little bit of fatherly, disappointed father influence from Mbrose, the Dean of Shadow. Mbrose, the Dean of Shadow, is the back half of Shale, Dean of Radiance. If you drafted Strixhaven, this is the black-white rare.
Flip card.
The back side is Mbrose, who is a legendary creature, human warlock. 2 colorless, black, gets you a 4/4. Has the activated ability of tap, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature. Then Mbrose deals 2 damage to that creature. And whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, draw a card. Mbrose was a Silver Quill professor and, of course, dean, who was a grandmaster poet and used ink magic, and was like the picture of using a cutting remark to deal actual damage.
Yeah, it was a really fun mechanic to play, even in limited as well, because sometimes you did just want to kill your creature, hit your X1 and get that card, but also it was a nice way to add a lot of power to the board. But also, didn't it also kill opponents' creatures, right? It could hit opposite side, if I'm not mistaken.
On another target creature, that's right.
Yeah, so you could use that very flexibly as well to finish off a creature post-combat, which I remember being very, very handy and difficult to play around.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I realized that.
You're welcome. That's a little too late, but here we are.
Oopsies. Well, they did run Strixhaven drafts back on Arena here recently. But this card on rate is already fantastic. 4 mana for the 4/4. Being able to use it on their creatures is super cool and neat. Any X1 is just going to die. Any of your X1s can be, sort of cashed in for a card. That's awesome. I mean, you could argue this card literally whips them into shape. Okay, it's a whip joke. All right, sweet. Nerd Girl, what's your number 9?
So this one is a little bit of a duplicate, even though it wasn't a same. This is very, very similar to Ruben's first card. We have another vampire sire. We're going to go with Baron Sangir.
There we go.
Baron Sangir is a very, very expensive card at 5 colorless, 3 black. Summon a legendary 5/5 flyer that says whenever a creature is put into the graveyard the same turn Baron Sangir damaged it, put a +2/+2 counter on Baron Sangir. You could tap to regenerate it. He is the sire of the entire Sangir line, which is a pretty common vampire type. It's also kind of interesting in the lore that he has a abducted daughter that he stole and like kind of forced her to like think that he's the father, and that is Irini Sangir. It's a card that was printed in Homelands. So he does have an actual like daughter, like an adopted daughter, but like in a creepy vampire way. So
and it's a +2/+2 counter. You don't just get those every day. I mean,
yeah,
they got a little cute with the counters there for a minute, and even gave you little like punch card sheets and like Inquest or whatever to use for counters and stuff, and starter decks and stuff had little stuff like that. Either way, it's on the reserve list, so they're never going to be able to reprint this guy. And so it's like $8.50 as of this recording. And if you want a copy, well, enjoy your 8 mana 5/5s.
Yeah. I mean, Baron Sangir is an iconic character in the game, and the Sangir bloodline is one of the few bloodlines of vampires that are found on multiple planes. The Sangir vampires originated in Olgrotha, which is the land of Homelands, but also Karazov and Arvad are Sangir vampires, and they exist on Dominaria.
Nice. Yeah, and they tried to bring back Baron Sangir as Singir the Dark Baron. That showed up in the original Commander Legends. Not quite as interesting, I think, as it could be, but still, I'll take it.
Still owe you a pie bet for that, actually.
There's a pie bet going on there. Well,
yeah, I said that they would not reprint Sangir on a Magic card, and then less than 24 hours later, they said that there was going to be the Dark Baron.
And you gave me like a year or something? And
I gave him like a year, and it was literally like the next day.
Okay.
What? Sorry?
She just said okay.
I said, okay, that's a short bet. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I did not wager well. I had a foil copy that I was looking for, but I can't find it right now.
Well, there you go. Well, for my number 9, again, somewhat of a pass. And this is seen not just by myself, but plenty of things that I read around the internet. Boy, were they just dying to give the big dad energy to a Johnny, and how he looks over the pride. Now he takes care of everybody. Now he adds stuff to all your creatures, and everybody's sweet. Because the Johnny Goldmane originally showed up in Lorwyn. It's 2 white, 2 generic mana for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. It has +1 of gain 2 life, -1 of put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn, and -6 make a white avatar creature token, and it has, quote, this creature's power and toughness are each equal to your life total. So you played a Johnny Goldmane, you made all your creatures big and scary, and now they have vigilance, and so they protect a Johnny, and a Johnny's protecting you, and all that cool stuff, and big dad energy.
Sure.
Big dad energy, not actually a dad, but a lot of people's father figure. And I think that is oftentimes more important than actually, doing the thing.
Yeah. He certainly shows up late, like a deadbeat dad. He certainly shows up in set 2 of 3.
Are you saying that Johnny went to get cigarettes and then
he did? He went to the store and then showed up in set 2 of 3 in like 4 different story arcs. He seems like a nice guy.
He seems like a wonderful character, doesn't he?
I didn't know you had such strong feelings about.
I didn't until I started talking.
I thought I was all on board for the dad bit, but maybe I was incorrect.
No, he's definitely a father figure, and he definitely provides really good advice to Elspeth and others throughout the story of Magic. So
let's move on to number 8, shall we? Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
My number 8 is my first of 3 hires.
Oh no! Well, it's my first of 4 hires. Ruben, do you have a number 8?
I do have a number 8, and it is it is difficult to like this character, but I appreciate that this character exists in the form that they gave him to us. In the story of Ikoria, we get precious little as it pertains to many of the humans. But we get some, and one of the humans we meet is Luca, the Coppercoat outcast. And the reason why he's the Coppercoat outcast is because he formed a bond with a beast, a winged cat, and was sort of kicked out of the army. And the army that he was kicked out of was the Draneth military. And Luca and a woman named, let me see here. What's her name? It's on here somewhere. Jirina had a relationship, and Jirina's father was the general in charge of the military at the time, and his name was General Kudro of Draneth. He did not particularly like the boyfriend, did not particularly like the beast that he'd allied himself with, and that caused much consternation within the family. Spoiler alert for the end of Ikoria, Luca beats him in one-on-one combat, and Jirina, the daughter of General Kudro, ends up taking over. And so all's well that ends well. General Kudro, not exactly a nice man, but a professional and a very interesting character nonetheless.
Wait, didn't they kill the cat in Heartless Act?
They did. They killed the cat as well. So before the one-to-one combat with Luca, Kudro did end up killing the cat, which also not a great look. But he was a mythic rare from Ikoria. For a colorless, a white, and a black, he was a 3/3 human soldier. With other humans you control get +1/+1. And whenever General Kudro of Draneth or another human enters the battlefield under your control, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard, and pay 2 generic mana and sacrifice 2 humans, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater.
You know,
that's a lot of things.
It wasn't until he read the card that he wasn't talking about Luca. He's talking about Kudro as the choice for his number 8. Yes. I was like, oh, yeah, well, he's the dad of the princess and all that stuff. Absolutely. Yes. That's great. And it's a really cool card.
And then Jirina ends up taking over later on.
Yeah.
And she also gets a card, I think in a commander expansion.
That's the neat thing about the father list over the mother list. I feel like I got a lot more out of it. And I feel like a lot of the children and stuff were more cards. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more family connections in the cards that we found. Maybe that's because we had to look harder. I'm not sure, but there does seem to be a lot of stuff going on.
That's fair. Let's move on here to our number 7. Nerd Girl, do you have a number 7?
I sure do.
Right.
My number 7 is a bit of an older card, and I didn't actually know was a father until I started doing my research for this. But I actually put this guy on the list, not because I think that he himself is great, but like I kind of dig the art. Like when I found out who his kid was, I was like, oh, I liked that card. That card was really sweet. So we're going to talk about Baron Master Wizard. This is a rare from Urza's Saga. It's a 3 mana colorless blue for a summon legend 1/1. This is Baron Master Wizard. Counts as a wizard. You can pay to sacrifice a permanent, return target creature to its owner's hand. Baron Master Wizard is the father of Hannah Ship's Navigator. I don't know if this is a reprint, but the listing I have here is Masters 25 for a 3 mana legendary creature human artificer that does a bunch of really cool stuff. But the thing I liked the most about her card was like the art. Like it's so ornate and it has a lot of really cool things. So I think she's a really sweet character. So let's pay homage to her father, the Master Wizard.
Absolutely.
On the reserve list.
Great choice. I've got some fun facts about Baron Master Wizard. Hannah was originally printed in Invasion. She is a member of the Weatherlight crew. She and Gerard were the leading couple of the Weatherlight crew. And her death is what spurred on one of the major moments of the Weatherlight Saga, which was later recounted in Yogmoth's Vile Offering, the legendary sorcery from Dominaria, where Yogmoth offered to give Hannah back at the low cost of hundreds of thousands of other people's souls. Baron is an interesting character. He and his wife, I believe his wife, Rain, the Academy Chancellor, were teachers at the Tolarian Academy, and had some interesting adventures while the overlay was occurring. The Magic card Baron Master Wizard was in the Beware of Squirrels deck. The Beware of Squirrels deck was a Urza's Block all-star, let's say, where you kept bouncing Deranged Hermit back to your hand and untapping your Gaia's Cradle with Cloud of Fairies to make infinite mana and infinite squirrels.
That is a thing to do. That is a thing you can make happen. Yeah, it's just another one of those. Makes me sad. It's on the reserve list. We'll not be able to see a non-digital version of it show up. But, maybe one day we'll actually get it in a digital client. Have fun with it there. But I definitely have seen cubes with Baron Master Wizard in them, as well as some other family members, as mentioned. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is... I for some reason I knew that this was going to be on my list. I was like, what dads exist? And immediately this card came to mind, and I have no explanation as to why. I'm sorry that this is the first dad that I put on my list. I don't know why I thought of this, but on top of the heap of some of the measliest, meekest, and meanest sort of bad guy villains in all of Magic the Gathering, you do need to have a head kobold in charge. And that, of course, is Roga of Carekeep. I have no explanation to why I thought of him first, but I did. Roga of Carekeep is 2 generic, 2 black, and 2 red mana for a legendary creature kobold who's a 5/5 originally from Legends. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay red. If you don't, tap Roga of Carekeep and all creatures named kobolds of Carekeep. Then an opponent gains control of them. Creatures you control named kobolds of Carekeep get +2/+2/+2. Of course, he is the father of a newer card, Rogrok, son of Roga, who is a 0 mana legendary kobold warrior that has partner. And I know that Rogok is not super fond of his father because he doesn't think his dad dreams big enough, basically, and kind of wanted to attack things outside of their current realm. Why leave these human villages untouched when we could just go out there and do that?
Cute card. I like the art on some of these Carekeep cards in general, but the Kobolds of Carekeep card is quite humorous.
Yeah.
Kobolds were this cute little thing they did in Legends. This was the card that was going to sort of tie it all together. Of course, it's $80 because it's on the reserve list, which sucks because the card's bad. Like, the card's really, really awful. But, 5/5s back in the day were a huge deal because creatures just weren't that big. And it was nice to see them, kind of try. This was tribal before tribal existed. They didn't know what the hell was going on. So you had kobolds, you could play them for nothing. They were O1s. It was kind of cute and silly. It also, I think, kind of pushed on the idea that when they made Midnight, they didn't think it was going to be very good, in that we've had 0-cost creatures and they were okay, but you had power and things change. But yeah, Roga of Carekeep is a neat one. Let's move on here to my number 7. This one I felt was, I don't know if it was default, but it certainly felt like I couldn't not mention this character because we certainly mentioned his wife, right? And they're like a super, I don't know, power couple, quote unquote, maybe not. But, when you have the Pia, you might as well have the Kieran of the Nalar family. Pia and Kira Nalar did show up originally in Magic Origins for 2 red and 2 generic mana. It's a 2/2 legendary creature, human artificer. When Pia and Kira Nalar enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. And for a red and 2 generic mana, you can sacrifice an artifact and it deals 2 damage to any target. And it's also a really nice embrace, he was a good dad. There was nothing wrong with this guy, and screw anybody, all that good stuff. He fought the good fight.
Yeah, this was the only father on my list that didn't have a card of their own, but, this scene was shown there. And, of course, I feel like being the father of Chandra is going to get you on some lists.
Yeah.
This was my 8.
Nice.
Yeah. I was close to putting this on the list, but I like you said, I couldn't find a card that really depicted Kieran in Kieran form. We get a good portrait of him in the art for Lost Legacy.
Yeah.
And of course he ended up being killed by Baral. I think before Chandra came back. Is that right?
That sounds right. Because she found her mom.
Yeah, but he was a freedom fighter. He was an inventor. And he was a good dad. And so definitely deserves a spot on the list.
There you go. Let's move on here to our number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
So I too have hires, and I have 4 of them. And I have hires at 6, 5, and 4.
Wow.
As well as 2.
And I got them at 5, 4, and 3. So, Nerd Girl, you got a number 6?
I have them at 6 and 5 are my last 2.
6 and 5. So
no 6s.
No 6s.
And 1 5?
And I have 1 6. I have my 6. My 6 is
still
here.
Yeah, you have your 6. Okay.
Yes. So we have a number 6. We didn't skip a whole number.
Nice.
This is a card that became a father. Now, I recognize that parts of the story is going to be discussed later with other various fathers of so on and so forth. But at one point, when there was corruption and there was worlds being taken over, Karn became the father of the machines, and Karn Silver Golem is my number 6. And for 5 generic mana, it is a 4/4 rare legendary artifact creature golem. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4/+4 until end of turn. For 1 generic mana, target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its converted mana cost until end of turn or mana value these days. And also, interestingly, is a part of the reserve list, but was reprinted in from the Vault Relics, and that caused a lot of consternation.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say because I will fight you on this on a later number.
I know. I agree. And I will fight myself later, but things become other things in different parts of the timeline. So I'm later in the timeline. We'll go before the timeline. But at one point, he does get there.
He is called the father of machines. This is an accurate statement.
Yeah. So we have no number 5. They're all higher. And only Nerd Girl has a number 4. So what's your number 4?
I do have a number 4. And this is a shared card that we did for the Mother's Day. And I thought it only right to do the other half of it. And this is also a card that was really impactful in Standard. And I still think it sees a ton of play, especially in EDH. And his kids are awesome. So let's go ahead and talk about Kenneth, the Returned King. Kenneth is a 5 mana human noble. He is a 5/5 legendary creature with a ton of abilities. For a red, he can make creatures gain trample and haste. For 1 and a green, he can put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. For 2 and a white, he can make target player gain 5. 3 and a blue, he can make target player draw a card. And for 4 and a black, he can put a creature card from graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Kenneth is, in the Eldraine, he's the iconic story king and queen, and his kids are the twins, the Planeswalkers, which is a pretty neat family tree they've got going on.
Yeah, this was my number 5.
No, mine too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go. We're right there. We're right there with you as a mid-range. This is like a mid-range choice dad. Alginus Kenrith is the king, the High King of the realm of Eldraine. And he's the King Arthur equivalent. He goes off on a bit of a trek where he's turned into a deer by the trickster spirit Oko, and it's all part of a ploy to entrap Will and Rowan, and eventually it all ends up okay, and of course, as depicted on the card Happily Ever After, things end up being okay.
Now, this is also infamous, I guess, in some ways, in that it is a buy a box promo and is the only way to get this card. This mythic was to buy a box of Throne of Eldraine, which means it is only available as a foil, and that caused its own problems or whatever. And so Kenneth was really, did they have non-foil versions of him? I honestly can't remember. But because I see 2 listings here, but they're basically the same amount. Either way, I got to give it to Wizards. they really did say we're going to make good cards that you can only get when you buy a box of the newest set, and that was kind of wild. It kind of went completely crazy until they made a Time Walk or whatever. But until then, Kenneth was still, and it's still a fantastic card for only $5.50. That seems, for a 5-color commander, that seems like a steal right there. It does so much.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to number 3. I don't have a number 3. Ruben, what is your number 3?
I do have a number 3. I have a number 3 that is a character that you're going to love, Evan, because we're going to your favorite plane of existence, Kamigawa. This is a character that not only is a father, but is noted as the father of the most other named Magic cards, as far as I can tell. There is a huge family of snake monks amongst the Orochi. And as the Broodmaster, Seshiro the Anointed is my number 3.
My number 8.
I'm sorry?
It's my number 8.
There you go. Seshiro the Anointed is a 3/4 legendary creature snake monk, 4/4 generic green. Other snake creatures you control get +2/+2, and whenever a snake you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. That's a powerful Magic card. I mean, that is +2/+2 to every other snake, and you draw a bunch of cards. That's some good Magic.
One of the things, so it's interesting to have a snake lord, but we have some discrepancies in the snake and serpent world.
Yeah.
Because you have like Wormcoil Serpent, which is like a snake, but not a serpent. So that doesn't trigger for the big Simic snake thing, whatever that thing is. That wants you to sack serpents. I don't know. So it's interesting to see a serpent snake lord here when I know that that's been not a hot topic, but like a thing that people bring up every couple of weeks. So it's really a neat card, and I like to see not super popular creature types get a little love.
Yeah, I wanted this card to be so good. I assure you. I mean, this was Kamigawa. I was in love with Kamigawa. I tried my best. I assure you I built this deck. I built it. I rebuilt it. I did everything I could. It just cost 6 mana. It costs 6 mana. It does nothing. It does the pump, but it otherwise does nothing when it enters the battlefield. Your creatures have to connect. Again, it's 6 freaking mana. If this had been 5 mana, or God forbid, 4 mana back in those days, I think it would have been incredibly interesting and could have been a giant part of the metagame on rate alone, but they made that rate real bad, and that's not unheard of in Champions of Kamigawa.
Yeah, and the other problem, of course, was the best ramping snake at the time required you to sacrifice it, which was Sakura Tribuilder.
Right.
So you couldn't get that benefit. One of his children, I believe it's Sosuke, son of Seshiro, gives a toughness bonus and also allows your snakes to tap for mana. So it was possible to go like
Sachi lets them tap for mana and gave them a toughness boost, and Sosuke pumped their power and gave them basically death touch.
Got it. I got it.
And so, but none of them gave them trample, for example. So when you slam down Seshiro, you couldn't get through, and it was like really annoying. But it is nice to have a Tales of Master Seshiro as a card, and Seshiro's Living Legacy as the flip side, which is super neat. And I think that's great. I'll take a call back.
Yeah.
All right. Nerd Girl, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card. Technically, I mean, he's going to be a father of another vampire line, but I think he's a really important character because he himself is very, very popular in EDH and very recently reprinted as not reprinted, but created as a new card. That was a pretty big bomb. But also he's the grandfather of Sorin, which is super interesting lore-wise. So we're going to talk about Edgar, and I picked the Charmed Groom as the card that we're going to talk about. 2 colorless, white and a black, and he's a legendary vampire noble that says other vampires you control get +1/+1. When Edgar the Charmed Groom dies, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, and it flips into Edgar Markov's Coffin. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink, my favorite kind of vampires, and put a bloodline counter on Markov's Coffin. When you get 3 or more bloodline counters onto it, you can remove it and transform it back pumping all your other vampires, which is pretty cool. But he's, just a big time vampire character that's involved in his brood. And again, Soren's grandfather, which is a pretty big deal. Two pretty major characters stacked together.
Two great tastes that,
Yeah, Edgar Markov is the vampire of Innistrad, and it's tough to get more fatherly than that. I mean, ultimately, maybe not every vampire is directly associated but at least the vast majority of vampires can directly draw back to Edgar Markov.
Wow. And maybe Crimson Vow wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Looking over the list here, there are some fairly pricey cards that are in the set. I think the card is great. I think the fact that you can pick up Edgar Markov, like this version of him, the Charmed Groom, as Dracula the Voyager for like less than $2 seems freaking awesome if you want to build a vampire deck and whatnot. It's right there for the taking. So, Nerd Girl, that was your number 3, correct? All right.
Yes.
Awesome. Move on here to number 2. Ruben, yours is higher.
Mine is higher.
So, Nerd Girl, what's your number 2?
So my number 2 is an interesting character I think that you guys will like. And we've recently seen his child like reimagined in the most recent Kamigawa. So we're going to talk about Konda, Lord of Iganjo. Yeah. This is originally a Kamigawa, Champions of Kamigawa card. It's a 5 colorless white human samurai. He's a 3/3 with vigilance and Bushido 5. And he's indestructible. He was the original king of Kamigawa storyline. And also his daughter is Michiko, which is one of the sagas from the most recent one that we saw, which is, actually seeing some standard play, which is pretty awesome in the runes deck, but also just an absolute powerhouse in limited as well. I really liked the Michiko card, and it was fun to learn some of the lore and story behind these two. And that's the only important relevant part to my research. Take it away, Ruben.
Well, when I was doing the Forgotten Lore for Champions of Kamigawa and stuff, like I read the book, like I got through the whole bit and how Konda, he stole that which was taken and stuff and started the war, and it was a whole mess, and he was quite the interesting kind of villain ultimately.
Yeah, he did kind of cause the war with the spirits. Like, there's no two ways about it. Huh?
And kept it a secret too.
He kept it a secret too. Yeah. It was not great. He wanted to secure peace for the humans, and in doing so did the opposite. He also has one of the most gruesome deaths I think have ever been described canonically within Magic the Gathering, which is that he and Okagachi, the two leaders of the spirits and the humans, were struck down by their daughters, Michiko Konda and Kyodai, the Taken One. And after, so the Taken One punctured Konda's eyes, then petrified his immortal body and crushed him into 1,000,000 pieces. Hundreds of years later, Konda's undying remains are presumably still lying in the Jukai forest. Brutal.
Bruh.
Sounds like a day at the spa.
Yeah.
Please grind me into 1,000 or 1,000,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Look, man, I thought I love this card. I love the look of it. I love the feel of it. I think Bushido 5 sounds neat and interesting. Never really did not much, and it's worth almost $10. I think partly because it's a cool white commander, and it's been a long time since it was printed. All right, let's move on here to my number 2.
He's also a dog dad. He's also Isamaru, Hound of Konda's dog dad.
He is dog dad.
Aww.
Dog dad energy. But this card is my number 2. I'm fairly positive it is on some other lists because this guy is just super crazy important. Between the Weatherlight Saga, it's a hell of a thing to kind of be the dad to the greatest hero and the greatest villain of the sagas, and that would be CedarCondo of Jamura. There's a white, a green, and 2 generic mana for a 2/5 rare legendary human knight with flanking, which means whenever a creature without flanking blocks this creature, the blocking creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less, and it has partner, which means you can have 2 commanders if both of them have partner.
Yep. This was my number 6.
Nice.
I will point out that CedarCondo is also featured on a Vanguard card. For those of you who are Vanguard fans, not a particularly good Vanguard card, but he does appear there. This is a card that used to be in my Arcades the Strategist commander deck, because, you know, making your creatures with power 2 or less better is very good. But yeah, CedarCondo is a huge facet of the Weatherlight Saga and the early story of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah. Super cool. All right, let's move on, y'all, to our number ones. Oh my goodness. Nerd Girl, what's your number 1?
So I have the real father of machines as my number 1. Because, and I'll tell you guys why, storyline wise, which took me a good chunk of the day figuring out. So Yogmoth, Theron Physician, is a 4 mana 2/4 human cleric with protection from humans. You can pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and draw a card. You can pay to discard a card and proliferate. So Yogmoth was the father of machines that ruled Phyrexia, and then he was killed at the end of the Apocalypse storyline. Karn got infected during the war with the oil, and then somehow found himself on Mirrodin, which had become corrupted with new Phyrexia stuff. And then he becomes worshipped by the people that live on that plane, and he's corrupted. And then finally, eventually, Venser sacrifices his spark to purify Karn, and then Karn's like, yeah, screw it, and then like takes off. So he's basically like a deadbeat stepdad who was only there to get laid, and then he left. Wow. So definitely not one of the top followers. Yogmoth is definitely the real father of machines.
Goodness gracious.
Well done.
All right. That was
well argued.
My number 3 was definitely.
This was my number 2.
Oh, nice. Well, there you go.
In addition, by the way, Yogmoth is in fact an actual dad. Canonically, he's the father of Carrick.
That's right.
Who also recently got a new commander card that was like Carrick or something like that. It's a weird apostrophe. But yeah, also an actual dad in addition to being the father of machines.
There you go. All right. Well, Ruben, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is, I mean, I feel like it had to be my number 1. He has the most adorable art with his wife and his daughter climbing on his shoulder in the world, so much so that it was the artwork of the year as chosen by Magic Mike's during the Magic Mikesies, on a beautiful art illustrated by Keneo. It's the best dad. It's the best dad in Magic, and that's Teferi, the hero of Dominaria. If we can get that Black is Magic art on the screen as often as possible on this podcast, but certainly when I'm talking about this card. Teferi, the hero of Dominaria, is 3 generic white-blue, 4 loyalty planeswalker. That's a legendary planeswalker Teferi with +1 draw a card. At the beginning of your next end step, untap up to 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. And -8, you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. I didn't have to read you any of that. Everybody knows what this card does. We've all played against it 100 million times.
We can. And I think that the other thing I like to note, this was my number 6, is that his child, the card that we recently got in M21, is in the same colors as Teferi, and it's like still sort of legendary. Discard a card, draw 2 cards. It has flash. Like, it does a lot of really cool Teferi-y things, and I thought that was a really beautiful touch, connecting these 2 characters in the world of Magic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Teferi was certainly high up on my list. It was my number 4. This character is just like it's just driven so much of the Magic story itself, and like, you know, his mistake and the redemption and the calling back to the family and what he lost and how that drives him and all this other stuff. And of course, being one of just the, honestly, I feel like it's one of the best designed planeswalkers ever made. It's powerful, it's exciting, it's not overpowered, it will drive a format, but it won't ruin a format. Does that make sense? Like, and it's okay when they do that. Like, when I want my planeswalkers to do that. Like, they want to be cool and powerful and interesting, and they, you know, they want to build decks around them, and you want to feel like you can kind of take over the game if you get long enough sort of tail on them. And, you know, for Teferi to have that moniker, essentially, where when they make a Teferi, they generally make a pretty good planeswalker, and that's nice too. For my number 1, which is your number 4, Ruben, and Nerd Girl's number 5, by process of magical elimination. There was a dude that called out to me sort of more personally than others. It's a planeswalker that had 2 daughters, Rumi and Jamira. And he was a planeswalker that kind of got trapped in the world of Ixalan along with other people. And he wanted nothing more than to get the hell out of there and go back to his family because he missed his family. And that was his whole thing. And the instant the immortal sun was taken, Angrath vanished, cursing Ixalan and his passing words. I'm reading from the wiki here. He then reunited teary-eyed with his daughters at their family's smithy. The wanderlust of a planeswalker is hard to deny, and with his daughters safe, he finds himself exploring the multiverse once again. But that means he can always go back home and always be there for his family as Angrath the Flame Chained. This is a red, a black, and 3 generic mana for a 4 loyalty planeswalker that showed up as a mythic in Rivals of Ixalan, rather. For +1, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. -3, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step if it has a mana value of 3 or less. And -8, each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. And I have used all of those abilities at some point in time. This card is really cool. It's really great against control decks, and it's a fantastic story.
Yep. The Cow Dad is great.
Cow Dad. I didn't in my research, I didn't find the story exactly, just because it takes a long time to read. But the gist that I got from multiple sources is that he goes through this like epic tale, epic saga to do everything he can to get back home to his family and his children, which sounds amazing. And I look forward to learning more about that.
Yeah. Basically, his whole impetus was he would go, once he found out that he was a planeswalker. First of all, he was just a blacksmith. He was just a dude. But once he became a planeswalker, he started just planeswalking to get gifts for his family and accidentally got trapped on Ixalan for 14 years.
Okay.
Because the immortal sun was there, right? Then the immortal sun goes to Ravnica, and then he goes to Ravnica to fight the War of the Spark, and he gets trapped in Ravnica. And then Huatli kind of jabs at him, is like, haha, you got trapped again. And then ultimately is like, all right, I did my duty. I'm going home to my family. I'm done with you assholes. And I have huge respect for that. He's just grumpy dad that loves his family.
And there is a wonderful Year of the Ox 2021 promo version that's about $35 or so right now, and I'm guessing that's going to be really expensive one day.
Nice.
That said, that was our top 10 MTG dads. Oh my goodness, you'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys. I look forward to seeing you next week for the news.
Ooh, thank you, Ruben.
Takes a real man to be a dad. Happy Father's Day to all dads out there.
Yay. Being dads rule. I like being a dad. That's fun.
Good.
All right, let's move on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AltarSleeves.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.